Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, bringing you some of the best college football news, predictions, and analysis. New Year's Day will bring us one of the best bowl games of this entire postseason, as number 14 Michigan takes on number 13 Alabama in the Citrus Bowl. And guys, this was a matchup that back in the preseason we thought could have been a college football playoff semifinal game. That's how highly we thought of both the Wolverines and the Crimson Tide. More so Michigan than Alabama, but still, these were two teams that we expected to be in the thick of the college football playoff hunt when the season came to an end, and they both fell just short. When you look at Alabama, this was a very disappointing year by their standards. A team that had yet to miss the college football playoff did so for the first time this season, and a lot of that was in part to Tua Tagovailoa's injury. He goes down, out for the year in that win over Mississippi State. They lose to LSU at Bryant-Denny Stadium. That didn't ruin their college football playoff hopes quite yet, but the loss to Auburn in the Iron Bowl did. That loss eliminated Alabama from playoff contention. A win there, you may have been able to see the Crimson Tide sneak in as that number 4 seed. But Alabama sitting at 10-2 on the year, and you start to wonder, will they be motivated for a game that's not going to help them get to a national championship? That's not a playoff game, and it's not a national championship game. It's very uncharacteristic and a very different setting for a Nick Saban-led team. When you look at Michigan, it was a very disappointing season for them too. We thought that the Wolverines had the chance to go 10-2, 11-1, or even undefeated, believe it or not. A team that many thought could make the college football playoff for the first time under Jim Harbaugh, could finally break through under Jim Harbaugh and achieve those lofty expectations. The Wolverines disappointed early, going just 9-3, getting blown out by Wisconsin back in September, losing to Penn State, and then of course falling yet again to Ohio State, even though they started to find their offense down the final stretch of the season. And that's where we're going to begin our analysis here, is looking at the offense and looking at Michigan's offense more specifically, one that's averaging 33 points per game this season, which sounds like a great mark. But if you watched Michigan through their first 6 games and then watched them through their final 6 games, they looked like two completely different teams. Two completely different teams, especially when it came to the offensive side of the ball. The Wolverines scored 30 points or more 3 times in their first 6 games. They did 30 points or more 4 times in their final 5 games. Think about that. 30 points or more 3 times in just the first 6. 30 points or more 4 times in their final 5. So something clicked, as we've said over and over, about the second half, or maybe the end of that Penn State loss down in Happy Valley, the one where the Wolverines just narrowly lost to the Nittany Lions. But they have a fairly balanced offense here, 252.3 passing yards per game and 149.8 rushing yards per game. The last time Alabama faced a fairly solid offense, one that was extremely balanced, was Auburn, and they fell 48-45 to the Tigers. Shea Patterson leads the Wolverines in his final collegiate game, 2,828 yards passing on the year, 22 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. He was a really highly touted transfer going from Ole Miss, so he's faced off against Alabama before, going from Ole Miss to Michigan. Many people thought that was the answer for Michigan to finally turn the page, to beat Ohio State, to get to the playoff, and he fell just short, even though he's had a fairly decent career up in Ann Arbor. For Alabama, yes, the major storyline is, they're not going to have Tua Tagovailoa. And the major storyline now is he going pro? Is Tua coming back, or is he going pro? The filming of this video, we do not know. We might not even know by the time this game is played on New Year's Day. But the Crimson Tide still are averaging 48.3 points per game. Most of that from Tagovailoa's time as starter. But Mac Jones did not play poorly in his first real start. Yes, he played against Arkansas. That's not a big deal. Yes, they played against an FCS opponent. Not a big deal. But in his first legit game in the Iron Bowl against Auburn, he threw for 335 yards, 4 touchdowns, but had 2 very costly interceptions. 2 of those, the 2 interceptions, resulting in pick sixes Alabama lost by 3. So those ended up being huge for the Crimson Tide, ruining any chance they had at the playoff. But the one thing that Mac Jones has that Michigan certainly does not, Mac Jones, once again, not a bad quarterback, is one of the best wide receiver cores in the entire country. He has some of the best receivers in the nation alongside him. And these receivers, as of this filming, are not going to be sitting out of this bowl game. Not many Alabama players are. Not many Michigan players are, which is why this is going to be such a great matchup down in Florida. But he's got Jerry Jeudy, one of the best and most elusive route runners in the entire country. He's got Devontae Smith, who has 65 receptions for over 1,200 yards and 13 touchdowns on the season. He has been unstoppable for opposing defenses. Annihilated LSU when the Crimson Tide fell just short, 46-41 back in November. And then, of course, Alabama's got Najee Harris, the running back who has 1,088 yards and a rushing offense that averages nearly 170 rushing yards per game. So this Alabama offense, even though they don't have Tua, is still going to be productive against Michigan, who has a fairly solid defense coming into this game, allowing just 19.5 points per game and allows just 292.8 yards per game. That's not rushing yards, that's not passing yards, that's collectively less than 300 yards per game. So they do have one of the better defenses in the country. And we knew that. Michigan under Jim Harbaugh has always had a fairly strong defense. The question is, can they stop Alabama's receivers? Can they stop Najee Harris? Can they slow them down? Can they create some pressure on Mac Jones? Can they create some turnovers for Mac Jones like Auburn did? That's the only reason Auburn won that game, guys. I don't want to take anything away from the Tigers. But we got to keep in mind that 14 points for Auburn came off of the pick sixes, and then Alabama shanked a field goal that could have tied it in regulation. So those 17 points right there, Alabama probably should have won that game. All said and done, they probably should have won that game. So 2 pick sixes, but that's going to be the key for Michigan here. If they can create turnovers, if they can get some scores and some points off of the turnovers, Jim Harbaugh could get a monumental win for him and for this Michigan program. For Alabama defensively, they are playing once again fairly well, but not nearly as well as they've been in the past. This has been, once again, an uncharacteristic year from the Crimson Tide. You could kind of feel it coming. As the season progressed, their defense did not look like it had in years past. And I think it's finally caught up to the Crimson Tide. There's all this talk about how every year there's so much turnover within the staff. You know, so many assistants are coming and going, taking new head coaching jobs, going somewhere else, maybe going up to the pros. And then you've got players leaving early for the NFL, maybe transferring out of the program. So much turnover within the state of Alabama football. Some are saying maybe it caught up to Alabama. But they're still only allowing 18.8 points per game. I know people across the country that would kill for that defensive margin. But they will be without their linebacker in Terrell Lewis, who has 6 sacks and 11.5 tackles for a loss. So he's not just some, washed up player. He's a legitimate starter for the Crimson Tide, and we do wish him well in his preparation for the 2020 NFL Draft. And they will be without their cornerback and Trayvon Diggs, who had 3 interceptions on the year. So that's 2 big defensive starters within an Alabama defense that has not been the way they have in years past, has not been up to par, has been fairly disappointing, allowing more points than they would like. You got 46 to LSU, 48 to Auburn, way too many points this season. Now you're going to be listening to a linebacker and a cornerback, something that Michigan, will try to exploit and attack very early in this game. But Alabama allows just 135.1 rushing yards per game and 183.4 passing yards per game. Neither of those are bad marks. And Michigan, even though they have had this newfound identity on offense, is not even close to being the most explosive offense that Alabama has faced this season. That title will, of course, go to LSU. And had there not been a few turnovers in that game, had Alabama maybe won the turnover margin and not committed any themselves, they may have been able to pull off the win at home. And who knows where they'd be right now. So who are we going to pick in this Citrus Bowl? This is one where I think people are already starting to talk about the end of the Alabama dynasty. People are, they got blown out in the national championship last year. They're losing players early this year to the draft. Tua Tagovailoa's out, and if he doesn't come back next year, people are going to be talking about the dynasty ending even more. So this is a very big game for both programs. For Michigan to get a program-building win over Alabama Nick Saban. To say you beat Nick Saban Alabama, that's a huge deal. Jim Harbaugh is 0-5 against Ohio State. He's 2-11 versus top 10 teams. And he's 0-2 in New Year's Six bowl games. This Citrus Bowl features none of that. Alabama is not Ohio State. Alabama is number 13 in the country. They're not a top 10 team. And the Citrus Bowl is in fact not a New Year's Six bowl game. Many will be questioning Alabama's motivation in this game. And I say, forget about it. Alabama and the Crimson Tide will win this game. We are rolling with the Tide in the Citrus Bowl. They're going to be just fine. They're going to be just fine. Nick Saban is not the type of coach that just rolls over and says, well, we didn't make the national championship. We didn't make the playoff. Oh, well, who cares? We'll try to win. If not, whatever. Go back and look at what happened the last time this happened, back in 2010. I know Alabama has played in other non-playoff or championship games since then, but back in 2010, they faced another team from Michigan, Michigan State, in this very same bowl game. Back then, it was the Capital One Bowl. And Alabama won that game 49-7. I get that was nearly a decade ago. But Alabama is a beast that you never want to poke. They are a beast that you never want to awaken. Maybe this game is close. I expect it to be close for at least 3 quarters. But in the end, those wide receivers, those NFL caliber wide receivers are going to be the difference in this one. Expect Alabama to get a late turnover. They pull away. They win the Citrus Bowl, and they clinch an 11-win season. Not exciting, not as big of a deal as we've seen from Alabama in the past, but still a solid year from Nick Saban considering all the circumstances that they've had to deal with this season. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here on YouTube. Make sure to check out everything we have for you in the description below. We've got the spread pick for the Citrus Bowl and every other bowl game over at thegridironexpert.com. And we've got some other exclusive content and offers that you do not want to miss as well. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe. And we will see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.